That black Tesla just shut down right in front of my house like it knew it had done something wrong. And honestly, I didn't feel bad. I just stood there, arms crossed, thinking, well, karma knows how to keep receipts. This woman, this HOA queen with a god complex, had been helping herself to my electricity for weeks like it was some kind of community buffet. And the wild part? I wasn't even her first victim. Anyway, if you've ever had a neighbor cross the line so far they forgot there was a line, yeah, I'd love to hear it. Drop your story in the comments. I'm not the only one dealing with this madness. You're watching QA Stories. Let's get into it. I used to think the biggest problem in my suburban neighborhood was deciding which garbage day to put out the recycling. You know how it is: quiet streets, manicured lawns, the kind of place where the most exciting thing that happens is someone getting a new mailbox. Everything felt predictable, safe. Kids rode their bikes without helmets. Neighbors left garage doors open. And the biggest drama was whether Mrs. Peterson's roses were encroaching on someone else's property line. It was the kind of peace that makes you forget the world has any real problems at all. I'm Yas Bayer, by the way, 35 years old, electrical engineer, and I live alone in this little ranch house I've been fixing up for the past few years. I specialize in home power systems, which basically means I spend my days making sure people's houses don't burn down from electrical issues. It's not thrilling, but it pays the bills. Keeps the lights on, literally. My life was pretty predictable until last month, when my electric bill hit me like a freight train. I'm talking way higher than normal. At first, I blamed the heat wave, but then that suspicious feeling started creeping in. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew. Maybe I was paranoid. Maybe I was working too hard and imagining problems that didn't exist. But you know that feeling when something doesn't add up? I started paying closer attention to everything. Checking if I left lights on, wondering if the AC was working overtime, even questioning if my fridge was secretly rebelling and guzzling energy. I'm an engineer, so my brain naturally kicks into troubleshooting mode when numbers don't make sense. That's when I noticed something weird happening near my garage. There's this outdoor outlet on the side of my house, right next to where I park. And I started seeing this extension cord plugged into it that definitely wasn't mine. At first, I thought I was losing it. Like, did I plug something in and forget? But then I followed the cord. It was running across my driveway and connecting to something parked on the street. That something turned out to be a black Tesla Model S. And let me tell you, it stood out in our neighborhood like a diamond in a pile of rocks. Most of us drive normal cars. Hondas, Toyotas, maybe a Ford if someone's feeling fancy. But this Tesla? Clearly someone's pride and joy. Always spotless. Always parked to catch the afternoon light, just right. I hooked up a quick meter, just out of curiosity. The spike was real. She was drawing more power than my fridge. The numbers don't lie, and these numbers were telling me someone was treating my home like their personal charging station. I didn't know who owned it first, but I had a pretty good idea it belonged to Dahlia Thorne, the woman who lived 3 houses down. Dahlia was one of those neighbors, deep in the HOA board, always involved, always knowing everyone's business, and never shy about sharing opinions. She once sent out a violation notice because someone had lawn flamingos. Said it violated the community aesthetic. Not joking. She used the word aesthetic in an official complaint about plastic birds. I'd heard she used to be some kind of investment fund manager before retiring. Explained the Tesla and her general, I run this place energy. She was probably around 50, always dressed like she was heading into a business meeting, even just to check her mail. Funny thing is, I actually tried to install my own charging station last year. Went through all the right steps, submitted paperwork, hired a licensed electrician, but the HOA shut it down. Cited aesthetic concerns. Neighborhood character. I was still annoyed about that rejection, especially since I'd followed every rule in the book. The first time I saw Dahlia plugging her Tesla into my outlet, I was ready to walk over and ask what was going on. I'm not a confrontational person, but come on, using someone else's electricity without asking? But then she looked up at me, and her expression, I can't even describe it. It wasn't apologetic or embarrassed like you'd expect if someone got caught. It was like she looked at me and thought, you owe me, like I was being difficult for even noticing. A few days later, I was chatting with Mr. Green, my neighbor, while getting the mail. He casually mentioned something that made everything click. You know, he said, nodding toward the Tesla. She used to park and charge at Mr. Davis's place. I think he got fed up and told her to stop. So she moved to your house. Mr. Green's one of those guys who notices everything but rarely says much. He's lived here over 20 years and delivers gossip like it's the weather. She's been doing this for months, he added. Rotates houses when people complain. That explained everything. Dahlia wasn't just being bold. This was a routine. I started wondering. Maybe she was going through something. Maybe her own power was out. I didn't want to be the neighbor who freaks out over a misunderstanding. So I watched, waited, tried to see if this was a one-time thing. Spoiler, it wasn't. She had it down to a science. Same time every evening. Pulls up, grabs the cord, plugs in, leaves. And every time, I had the same internal debate. Speak up or stay quiet. Every time I stayed quiet. It took her less than 2 minutes. Then she'd drive off in another car, leaving the Tesla soaking up my electricity. I still don't know why I didn't say something sooner. Maybe I hoped the problem would solve itself. Or maybe I didn't want the drama. But watching her from my kitchen window one evening, unplugging like she owned the place, that was it. I decided to start with a polite approach. I wrote a simple note and stuck it on her windshield. Nothing dramatic, just, "Hi, I noticed you've been using my outlet to charge your car. Could we chat about this when you have a chance?" I added my phone number, too. The note disappeared. She never called, never texted, and the next time she charged, she looked right at me through my window and smirked. I felt like a substitute teacher in a class of 8th graders, completely ignored. So I tried another tactic, orange traffic cones by the outlet. Subtle visual cue. The cones? Moved the very next day. Charging continued like nothing happened. I even left a formal letter in her mailbox, explaining the electric bill increase, asking if we could work out a solution. She could pay for the power, or at least give me a heads up. That letter disappeared too, and somehow she started charging even more frequently, like she was proving a point. Feeling defeated, I called up my old college buddy, Liam. He's in cybersecurity now, but he's always been into electronics. I figured maybe he had advice, or at least would listen without judgment. "Dude," he said, "be careful. Some people use sketchy charging equipment. Those illegal boosters can mess up your whole electrical system." He told me horror stories, devices that overload systems, trip breakers, even start fires. I remembered how in college, Liam blew out an entire dorm's breaker box messing with voltage mods. His words stuck. If it hums when it shouldn't, walk away. And that got me thinking, what if Dahlia wasn't just stealing power? What if she was about to fry my entire house? I decided I needed to get a closer look at exactly what was going on when she was charging her car. So, the next time I saw her Tesla plugged into my outlet, I waited until she left, then snuck outside to investigate. The porch light flickered once. Too much of a coincidence. My heart thudded like I was robbing my own garage. I'm not proud of the sneaking around, but at that point I felt like I needed to protect my property from potential damage. What I found completely changed my understanding of the situation. Dahlia wasn't just using a simple extension cord like I'd assumed. There was this small electronic device plugged between her charging cable and my outlet, something that definitely didn't look like standard Tesla equipment. It was about the size of a paperback book with LED lights on it and everything. I took some pictures with my phone and did some research when I got back inside. And what I discovered made my blood run cold. That device was a current amplifier, banned by electrical safety authorities back in 2019 due to fire hazards and potential electrical system damage. I actually had to read the safety recall notice twice because I couldn't believe someone would knowingly use banned electrical equipment. The device was designed to boost charging speed by manipulating electrical current in ways that could overload home systems. The recall notice specifically mentioned house fires and extensive property damage caused by these things. And here was Dahlia, using one on my electrical system without my knowledge or consent. That was not official Tesla equipment. She knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't an innocent mistake. It was a deliberate decision. She was willingly violating safety regulations and putting my home at risk. That was the moment I stopped seeing her as a neighbor. From that point on, she was a threat. Staring at that illegal device under my porch light, something shifted inside me. This wasn't about borrowing electricity anymore. It was about someone deliberately endangering my property. I wasn't sure if I was more angry about the deception or more worried about the safety risks. But one thing was crystal clear. This was the moment everything changed. Sometimes, being an electrical engineer comes in handy in ways you don't expect. After discovering Dahlia's illegal charging setup, I spent the next few days researching my options. And let me tell you, the legal landscape around this stuff is more complicated than you'd think. I had installed one of these protective devices before, back when I worked at a tech startup. Back then, it was to protect $40,000 servers. Now, it was for my $200 breaker box. But the principle was the same. I could have called the police, but unauthorized electricity use isn't exactly a high-priority crime. And proving intent or theft would have been hard. I could have gone to the HOA, but considering Dahlia's role on the board and my previous experience with them rejecting my legitimate charging station request, I didn't trust them to have my back. So I went with a technical solution. What I installed is called a surge protection cutoff device in my garage's electrical system. Now, before you think I was planning sabotage, let me clarify what this device does. It's a completely legal protective measure. It keeps home systems safe from unauthorized or incompatible equipment. It automatically cuts power for a few seconds whenever it detects something that could cause overload or electrical harm. It's like a sophisticated circuit breaker used in commercial buildings all the time. Installing it took me most of Saturday afternoon. And I'll admit, I had some second thoughts while working. At one point, I actually took the screwdriver back out, debating whether I was going too far. But the cord was back that night, and with it, my decision. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting. Was there still a peaceful way to resolve this, without turning it into a technical arms race? But then I remembered that banned current amplifier and the fire hazards it posed. My resolve hardened. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was protecting my home from illegal equipment. If Dahlia wanted to charge her Tesla, she could do it with legal gear or find another outlet. My device would only activate if it detected the electrical anomalies caused by her amplifier. The first time it activated, I happened to be looking out my kitchen window. The Tesla's reaction was instant. It blinked like a disco ball having a seizure. Something inside whirred and groaned, like the car itself was protesting. Error lights started flashing all over the dashboard, like something from a sci-fi movie. The charging process kept resetting every few minutes, and the display kept warning about unstable voltage. I watched Dahlia come out, trying to restart the charge multiple times. She kept unplugging and replugging, clearly getting frustrated. But every time the amplifier tried to draw excess current, my device would cut the power for 2 seconds, just enough to break the cycle. Watching it all unfold, I felt a mix of satisfaction and concern. At first, it felt like justice delivered through wires and circuitry. But then, I got worried. The Tesla's reaction was way more dramatic than I expected. Was I being vindictive? Was this justice, or just well-wired pettiness? My device only cut power for 2 seconds, but the car acted like it had been hit with an EMP. The lights blinked in unfamiliar patterns. I could swear I even heard some kind of alarm coming from the cabin. I began to wonder, was Tesla's charging system that sensitive? Or had I unintentionally created a feedback loop between my protection device and her band amplifier? That night, I dug deeper into how Tesla charging systems work. What I found made me even more concerned. These vehicles have incredibly advanced charging management systems. They monitor voltage, current flow, equipment compatibility, everything. If they detect anything irregular, they shut charging down to protect the battery. Now imagine that layered with an illegal amplifier and my surge device. It created a perfect storm. Each system was trying to protect itself, but they were all fighting each other. Over the next few days, I watched her attempts, and the Tesla's issues got worse. Error messages stayed longer. Charging interruptions happened more frequently. Sometimes, it wouldn't start charging at all. I saw Dahlia pacing around her car, checking connections like she was diagnosing a spacecraft. But she never once suspected the amplifier. She just kept trying the same thing, expecting different results that I'd lit the fuse. Now I just had to wait for the bang. Watching those blinking lights through my curtains, I began to wonder, had I solved my problem or created a bigger one? some people try to understand what went wrong. Dahlia wasn't one of them. Instead of checking her own setup, she escalated. She brought in the HOA. When you're used to wielding influence, your instinct is to leverage it. I'd hoped things might settle down, but I was clearly being too optimistic. The official letter came in the mail on a Tuesday morning, and I knew it was serious before I even opened it. This wasn't a standard HOA flyer or lawn care reminder. This was thick, formal stationery with 3 signatures and a bold letterhead that practically screamed legal action. The letter demanded a full electrical inspection to ensure community safety. Attached were anonymous complaints about dangerous electrical incidents. Reading them felt like stepping into an alternate reality. I was being painted as someone running an illegal operation out of my garage. Irregular activity, fire risks, unauthorized modifications, all written in such precise, technical language, almost like it came from someone with engineering knowledge. But what struck me most, not a single mention of Dahlia, her Tesla, or the illegal amplifier. Just me. The letter was signed by Ethan Blake, HOA board chairman, Rachel Hayes, their admin, and one board member I didn't recognize. Ethan was the ultimate bureaucrat. Everything had to be done by the book, 3 forms for signatures, 7 emails. He didn't solve problems, he processed them. And that meant Dahlia had framed her case perfectly, by the rules. But then it hit me, and my blood pressure spiked. This was the same HOA that denied my request to install a legitimate personal charging station just last year. And now they were accusing me of electrical misconduct. To make it worse, every element of the Maple Grove Estate's entrance display was built, without permission, on land that legally belonged to me. 8 years of trespassing, executed with the confidence of someone who thought they owned the zip code. I wasn't sure if I should be furious or impressed. I even hired a licensed electrician to design the installation according to local codes. But the HOA turned me down, citing aesthetic concerns and the potential impact on neighborhood character. So now they were basically supporting Dahlia's use of my outlet illegally, while having previously denied my request to install legal charging infrastructure. Talk about a double standard. It was so obvious, it was almost comical. If I wasn't allowed to install a proper charging station on my own property, then how is it acceptable for someone else to use my electrical system without permission? The more I thought about this contradiction, the more frustrated I became. I started wondering if Dahlia's position on the HOA board had influenced the decision to reject my charging station request in the first place. Maybe she wanted to keep charging options limited, so she could continue using other people's electricity without competition. The whole situation was starting to feel like a carefully orchestrated power play designed to keep me in my place while protecting her access to free electricity. Some neighbors knocked gently, like they were visiting a crime scene. Others just stared at the stakes in the ground like they'd discovered a UFO. Looking at that HOA letter again, I noticed something else that bothered me. The anonymous complaints were all dated within the past week, which meant they'd been filed right after Dahlia started having charging problems with her Tesla. It didn't take a genius to figure out that she'd probably encouraged people to file these complaints as a way to pressure me into backing down. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental, and the technical language suggested that someone with electrical knowledge had helped write them. I was dealing with a coordinated campaign, not just a frustrated neighbor. When Vera called me that evening, her voice had that carefully controlled tone people use when they're trying to sound reasonable while delivering threats. You know, those old surveys aren't always accurate, she said, like she was doing me a favor by pointing it out. Ah, there it was. The first crack in her voice. Not anger, not arrogance. Just a tiny flicker of fear trying to hide behind a banking executive's voice. The inspection was scheduled for the following week, and I had to decide whether to remove my protection device before they arrived. Part of me thought it might be easier to just take it out temporarily, let them do their inspection, and reinstall it afterward. But another part of me, the part that was tired of being pushed around by someone clearly in the wrong, wanted to stand my ground and face whatever consequences came. Have you ever felt completely trapped between doing what's right and doing what's safe? What would you have done in my situation? Holding that HOA letter in my hands, I realized this wasn't just about electricity anymore. But was I actually strong enough to fight an entire system? The countdown had begun, the moment the queen realized the board wasn't hers to control anymore. The next few days felt like preparing for battle, except I wasn't entirely sure what I was fighting for or against. The HOA inspection was looming, and I kept going back and forth about whether to remove my protection device. On one hand, taking it out would probably make the whole inspection go smoothly and avoid any confrontation. On the other hand, removing it felt like admitting I'd done something wrong, when in reality, I was just protecting my own property from illegal equipment. I called Liam again. His advice was surprisingly straightforward. Taking it out now basically admits you did something wrong. Keeping it there? At least you're still protecting your own property, which is your right. That conversation helped clarify my thinking, but it didn't make me feel any less nervous. You know, I've dealt with situations like this with friends before, and people always ask, were you scared during conflict like this? It wasn't revenge. At least, that's what I told myself. But maybe, just maybe, I wanted to see her squirm like she made others do. The honest truth? Yes. Standing up to people with power over you is always scary, especially when you're not sure if you're doing the right thing. There's this voice in your head asking, what if you're wrong? What if you're the problem here? But sometimes you reach a point where backing down feels worse than facing the consequences. I'd reached that point with Dahlia and her illegal charging setup. I decided to keep the protection device installed and face the inspection honestly and directly. If they asked me about it, I'd explain exactly what it was and why I'd installed it. If they wanted documentation, I had all the technical specs and safety certifications. And if they tried to claim it was dangerous or inappropriate, I was prepared to point out that it was far safer than the illegal current amplifier that started all this. I spent time organizing my paperwork and researching HOA regulations on electrical modifications, just in case I needed to defend my position legally. Part lawyer, part confession, part flamethrower. But I also started thinking about the bigger picture. This wasn't just about one person stealing electricity. It was about power dynamics and who gets to make the rules. Dahlia felt entitled to my resources because of her position in the community, and the HOA backed her up because she had influence they wanted to protect. Meanwhile, I was supposed to accept the arrangement to preserve neighborhood harmony. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this was a perfect example of how systems protect the people who know how to work them, while everyone else follows the rules. She set the rules. I just decided to play her game better than she ever could. But Dahlia wasn't done making her point. The day before the inspection, she deliberately showed up when she saw me checking my mail. I was just minding my business, sorting bills and ads, when I heard her voice behind me. Your outlet charges really well. My Tesla absolutely loves it. The tone was mocking and dismissive. I turned around, stunned. She was standing there with this smug smile, daring me to respond. It wasn't just provocation. It was a declaration of ownership. Like my outlet had become her community property. I wish I could tell you I had some brilliant comeback. But honestly, I was so shocked I just stared for a few seconds. Here was someone who'd been stealing my electricity for months, and she was acting like I should be grateful. I'm not sure what you mean. I finally managed. Not my most articulate moment. She laughed and walked away, leaving me standing there, completely outmaneuvered by someone with no shame. By midnight, I'd answered the same question 10 different ways. She's been building on your land for 8 years. That interaction made me realize something important. Dahlia wasn't just confident. She was dismissive of consequences. Her HOA connections made her feel untouchable. My polite attempts at resolution had made me look passive. But what she didn't realize was that every engineer has a breaking point, and she just found mine. She went from righteous fury to pleading grandmother in under a minute. If it hadn't been my land on the line, I might have admired the performance. You know that moment when someone pushes you too far? Do you back down or double down? Her smug smile made me realize tomorrow wouldn't be just an inspection. It would be a reckoning. I would finish it in a way she'd never forget. Because the worst kind of fear isn't losing your house. It's realizing the person you underestimated now holds the deed to your downfall. The morning of the inspection was perfect. Clear skies, gentle breeze. One of those calm suburban days that usually puts you in a good mood. But I couldn't relax. Was I about to be fined? Sued? Evicted? I had 3 folders of documentation and no idea if it even mattered. The worst part was not knowing what they'd already been told. For all I knew, Dahlia had painted me as some kind of electrical terrorist. Ethan Blake showed up right on time, with Rachel Hayes and some guy I didn't recognize. Apparently, their official electrical inspection technician. Ethan looked like he was ready to audit the Pentagon. Clipboard in hand, too tight, HOA smile that never reaches eyes. They spent an hour going through my electrical system like government auditors, checking the panel, testing voltage in every room. I have to give them credit. They were professional. Asked good questions. Wanted documentation for all modifications. When it got to my protection device, I explained everything, what it was, why I installed it. Showed them all the certifications and specs. The technician examined it, ran tests, then said, "Honestly, this is cleaner than most municipal installs I've inspected. You ever consider consulting?" He even said my device was something electrical engineers recommend for homes with sensitive electronics or power quality issues. He was genuinely impressed. Asked more technical questions. I felt vindicated. Ethan took notes. Rachel documented everything for the official report. Then, Dahlia showed up. Perfect timing, like she'd been watching and waiting. She approached with purpose, CEO energy. Not in her Tesla, but still smug. "I'm so glad you're finally looking into this," she told Ethan, all concerned neighbor tone. "I've been worried about electrical safety in the neighborhood." Then things took a wild turn. Wanted to prove everything was fine. Dahlia plugged in her Tesla, right in front of the inspection team. "See? Everything works perfectly." I stood there on my porch, watching like it was a slow-motion disaster movie. And then, the twist. Her charging port had recently been replaced by an aftermarket technician, not Tesla certified, and it wasn't compatible with her illegal current amplifier. The moment she plugged in, the Tesla glitched. A clicking noise. Dashboard lit up red and blue. Emergency strobes. Then, darkness. A hiss escaped from the hood, like it exhaled its last breath. Someone gasped. Someone else filmed. And Mr. Green muttered, "Oh, she cooked it." Everyone just stood there in total silence, watching this expensive piece of technology have what can only be described as an electrical nervous breakdown right before our eyes. The Tesla's charging system, already stressed from weeks of voltage interruptions caused by my protection device interacting with her illegal amplifier, finally encountered an incompatibility it couldn't handle. The aftermarket charging port sent signals that conflicted with the current amplifier, which sent conflicting signals to my protection device, creating a feedback loop that overloaded the car's entire electrical management system. The HOA inspection technician immediately started taking readings with his equipment, and I could see the concern on his face as he looked at the measurements. "This is definitely not normal," he told Ethan. "There's some kind of incompatible equipment in the charging setup that's causing electrical conflicts." He started tracing the connections and quickly discovered Dahlia's illegal current amplifier. "This device has been banned for safety reasons," he explained to the group. "It's designed to manipulate electrical current in ways that can overload home systems and damage vehicle electronics." Her hands hovered in midair like she wanted to say something, but couldn't form the words. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Ethan was furiously scribbling notes, and I heard him mutter under his breath, "We'll need to update policy immediately." I'm standing frozen on my front porch, not trying to help, not calling anyone, just watching this whole scene unfold with a mixture of shock and fascination. Part of me felt like I should probably do something, but honestly, I had no idea what that something would be. The neighbors who'd gathered to watch the inspection started whispering to each other about what they were seeing. "She's been plugging into his outlet constantly for months. That car probably just couldn't handle it anymore." The HOA inspection team was taking notes and photos, documenting everything for their official report, including close-up pictures of the banned current amplifier. Arlie tried everything she could think of to restart her Tesla, unplugging and reconnecting the charging cable, pressing buttons on the dashboard, even calling Tesla's customer service line right there on spot. But that car was completely dead, refusing to respond to any input whatsoever. The smoke had stopped, but the dashboard remained black and lifeless, like someone had just turned off a giant electronic device and couldn't figure out how to turn it back on. The inspection technician confirmed that the electrical failure was caused by the interaction between the illegal current amplifier, the aftermarket charging port, and the natural response of my protection system. As the tow truck pulled away with Dahlia's completely dead Tesla, I felt something I totally didn't expect. It wasn't gloating. It wasn't joy. It was relief, maybe, but heavy, like I'd won a war that didn't need to be fought in the first place. It wasn't victory. It was something else entirely. The Tesla was completely fried beyond any hope of repair. I found out later that the repair estimate came back at $18,000, which was basically more than the car was worth since it was already a few years old with decent mileage. Dahlia tried absolutely everything to avoid taking responsibility for what had happened. She hired lawyers, brought in independent electrical experts, even threatened to sue both me and the HOA for what she claimed was some kind of conspiracy to damage her property. Getting sued by the woman who stole my power felt like being mugged, then blamed for the bruises. But every single expert who examined the evidence reached the exact same conclusion. The electrical failure was caused by an incompatible aftermarket charging modification that conflicted with an illegal current amplifier. The combination of these unauthorized modifications had created a cascade failure that destroyed the car's electrical management system. Her insurance company took one look at the case and completely refused to cover any of it, citing unauthorized vehicle modifications that void the warranty. Apparently, using banned electrical equipment and non-certified aftermarket parts creates exactly the kind of liability exclusions that insurance companies love to enforce. The insurance adjuster's report was particularly damning, noting that the illegal current amplifier had been specifically recalled for causing the exact type of electrical damage that had occurred. Dahlia ended up having to sell the dead Tesla for scrap parts and use that money toward buying a used Honda Civic with high mileage and a few dents. The neighborhood status symbol that had once announced her success and sophistication got replaced by an economy car that basically screamed financial desperation to anyone who knew the backstory. The HOA, clearly embarrassed by the whole incident and probably worried about potential liability issues, quietly revised all their electrical usage policies to be more specific about unauthorized equipment and power sharing between property. Suddenly, charging stations were fashionable. 3 got approved in 1 week. Guess it takes a flaming Tesla to light a fire under bureaucracy. They also gave Dahlia a private warning about any future violations, though I suspect that was more for show than anything else, since her Tesla charging days were obviously over. Most importantly for me, they suddenly approved charging station requests from 3 different residents, including mine, which they'd rejected the year before. Funny how a public electrical disaster can change bureaucratic minds about infrastructure improvements. The new policy specifically prohibited the use of banned electrical devices and required proper documentation for any charging equipment installation. For several weeks after the incident, Dahlia completely avoided any eye contact with anyone in the neighborhood. Gone were the silk scarves and heels. Now it was oversized sunglasses and hurried steps, like she was hoping the pavement would swallow her whole. I'd see her hurrying to her Honda with her head down, which was the complete opposite of the commanding presence she'd had when she was driving around in that Tesla. The local gossip network, which had always treated her like some kind of neighborhood celebrity because of her HOA position and expensive car, became absolutely merciless in their analysis of what had happened. Her property values, social standing, and HOA influence, basically everything she'd built her entire identity around, had crumbled along with that Tesla's electrical system. I heard through the grapevine that she'd quietly resigned from most of her HOA board positions, citing personal reasons and time constraints. The financial impact went beyond just the car replacement. Dahlia had to hire multiple lawyers and electrical consultants to defend against potential liability claims, since the illegal current amplifier could have potentially caused damage to other homes on our electrical grid. The legal fees alone probably cost her several thousand, and all for nothing, since every expert reached the same conclusion about her equipment being the cause of the failure. I actually felt a little bit sorry for her at this point. She'd made some bad decisions, but the consequences seemed disproportionately harsh. However, what happened next completely changed my perspective on the whole situation. But here's where the story takes a turn that I honestly didn't see coming. And I'm still not sure if I completely understand it even now. About 2 months after the Tesla incident, on a quiet Sunday morning, while I was watering my front garden, I heard footsteps on my walkway. I looked up to see Dahlia approaching my house, carrying a plate covered with aluminum foil. Her hands were visibly shaking, and she had this expression I'd never seen before. Not the confident authority figure, not the smug neighbor who thought she owned the place, but just a regular person who looked genuinely nervous about what she was about to say. "Jasper," she said, and her voice was barely louder than a whisper. "I baked these cookies for you. They're apple cinnamon." Part of me wondered if the cookies were poisoned or worse, store-bought. I looked at her face really carefully, trying to figure out if this was some kind of setup or manipulation, but all the arrogance was completely gone. The entitlement had totally vanished. What was left was just a woman who'd learned a very expensive life lesson and was trying to figure out how to move forward from it. "I keep thinking about what you wrote in that note you left," she continued. "About asking permission first. About showing respect. I never really understood what that actually meant." She made a gesture toward her beat-up Honda parked in her driveway. I took the plate from her, and the cookies were still warm from the oven. "You know," I said carefully, "if you just asked me from the very beginning, I probably would have said yes, for emergencies anyway." She nodded, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "I thought being feared meant I was respected. You proved me wrong. I thought I was entitled to it. The HOA position, the Tesla, the way people looked at me when I drove by. I thought all of that meant I could just take whatever I needed. And now what do you think?" I asked her. Now I understand the difference between earning respect and just demanding it. That conversation lasted for almost an hour. And by the end of it, I realized that the Tesla incident had forced Dahlia to confront some fundamental assumptions about how the world worked. Over the following months, Dahlia transformed completely as a person, and I mean that in the most literal way possible. She resigned from most of her HOA board positions and instead focused on actual community service projects that help people rather than controlling them. She started organizing neighborhood cleanup days, helped elderly residents with yard work, and became genuinely helpful rather than demanding and entitled. The Honda Civic actually became a symbol of humility rather than failure. And kids in the neighborhood would wave when she drove by, which was something that never happened when she had the intimidating Tesla. She even started a small garden in her front yard and would share vegetables with neighbors, including me. One evening about 6 months later, Dahlia knocked on my front door again. But this time she wasn't carrying cookies. She was holding jumper cables. "My car battery died in my driveway," she said with a genuinely self-deprecating smile. "I was wondering if you could help me jumpstart it." I grabbed my car keys without hesitation. Of course, that's what good neighbors do for each other. As we connected the jumper cables, she said quietly, "It's funny how asking for help is actually so much easier than just taking it. And a lot cheaper, too," I replied, thinking about her $18,000 lesson. She actually laughed, genuinely laughed. Way cheaper. The Honda started up perfectly on the first try. And as Dahlia drove away, waving gratefully through her window, I realized something really profound had happened in our little neighborhood community. This whole situation wasn't really about electricity or Teslas or HOA politics at all. It was about what happens when people are forced to confront the consequences of their actions without the safety net of privilege or power to protect them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just being patient enough to let someone discover who they really are underneath all their defensive armor. That illegal current amplifier I found in my trash can the following week with a handwritten note for proper disposal. "Thank you for teaching me the right way to do things. D." I still have that apple cinnamon cookie recipe, and she brings me a fresh batch every few months now. We've actually become real friends, the kind that's built on mutual respect rather than fear or power games. Turns out the biggest surge wasn't electrical. It was emotional, and somehow we both survived it. The protection device is still installed in my garage, doing exactly what it was designed to do, keeping my home safe while allowing legitimate use by people who ask permission first. And my legitimate charging station finally got approved and installed last month, with Dahlia actually voting in favor of the proposal. Sometimes justice doesn't need to be served by anyone. Sometimes it just needs to be patient enough to let people serve themselves. The outlet's still there, but now it only powers things people ask permission to use. Imagine that. Funny how something as boring as an outdoor outlet turned into a neighborhood reckoning. I didn't plan on it. I wasn't out for revenge. But when someone keeps pushing, acting like the rules don't apply to them, well, eventually something snaps. Not violently, but surgically. I just happen to have the right tools. Ever dealt with a neighbor like that? Someone who took without asking and thought they were untouchable? If so, drop your story in the comments. I'm betting I'm not alone.